My mother said to me when I graduated with my degree in photography, she said, "We're so glad you became a photographer." And I said, "Mother," like, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Oh, we were so afraid you might become an artist."
Hi there. Emmet Gowin's work and approach offers one the opportunity to more fully understand what it means to deeply commit to a theme. A lot of photographs that I come across have elements that are interesting on an aesthetic or conceptual level, but they don't make me feel anything. This is an indication that the photographer hasn't shifted their engagement into the realm of emotion. They might have found a subject that is interesting and decided how they want the photographs to look, but they forgot to ask, how does this make me feel? Emotional engagement shapes how a photograph communicates because it influences not only what is shown, but how it's perceived. The photograph begins to feel lived in rather than merely observed. Gowin's photographs of his family, and particularly his wife Edith, are formally quiet and attentive.
Just to pick up the camera and look through it and look at her through the camera reminds me of why I loved her so much in the first place. But you can't say no to that. You just have to say, thank you.
In order to achieve these moments, Gowin had to move beyond the practical aspects of positioning his tripod and his unwieldy large format camera. After then paying attention to the background and lighting, he had to slow down the engagement in order to allow a sensitive tenderness to emerge between them. So the construction of his pictures, their form, becomes the support for their emotional meaning. Every now and again, as a photographer, one gets all of this right, and sometimes one's also able to produce something that is original. This is harder than one thinks because so many of the photographs that we see could be described as borrowed images. Gowin came to realize that his real photographic interest wasn't out there somewhere, but in recording the relationships he had with his family.
The part of my own photographic experience that will probably always be the most precious to me was the fact that I didn't have any kind of cosmopolitan understanding. I had a kind of very small local understanding, and I was a local person living in a local situation. And I realized that my own family, Edith's family, was as miraculous as the most distant people in the world. And they were at the same time the most available to me, and perhaps available only to me. But I hadn't any idea that art could be made by simply telling the story of your own life, your own experience.
Gowin grew up in Virginia in the 1940s. His father was a strict fundamentalist Methodist minister, while his mother played the piano in the church. He was expected to follow in his father's footsteps, but along the way he discovered photography. A few pictures made by Ansel Adams and Robert Frank made him realize that photography offered him an opportunity to express himself and, as he said, seize the fate and the unexpected. He eventually persuaded his parents to allow him to study art and managed to transform his experience of growing up in an ultra-religious household into something that was softer, more earth-based, but still deeply spiritual.
If a person has those connections, I have them, and they won't go away. I mean, I have them as both a burden and a blessing. I think it's only in my age now at 73 that I realize all my life I've wanted to be just exactly like my mother. Well, that's not like my father. My father was a fundamentalist, fire-breathing Methodist. My mother was actually a Quaker. And somewhere in the Quaker temperament that I picked up from my mother, the love of all things marvelous.
When I began looking at the pictures of his family, I noticed there were some parallels with the work of Sally Mann, especially her series Immediate Family. Then I found out that she had attended the University of Princeton during the time that Gowin was a professor of photography at the institution. Mann acknowledged that Gowin had been a huge influence on her, and that his family pictures had left a strong impression. At the time that Gowin began producing these photographs, one's own family wasn't considered to be a serious photographic subject. He encouraged his students to photograph what was closest and most meaningful to them, and opened up the space for them to consider their own life as a source of legitimate subject matter. While Gowin's work has a feel of reverence and quiet spirituality, Mann's photographs are filled with ambiguity and psychological unease. Inside Mann's home, one can find pictures made by Gowin and Diane Arbus, which is interesting because Mann's pictures embody elements found in the work of both these photographers. Occasionally, Mann seems to revisit Gowin, either consciously or unconsciously. Her photograph Fallen Child, a picture of Virginia with grass clippings on her moist skin, has many correspondences with this picture made by Gowin. It's interesting to look at the progression of photography and how ways of seeing are adapted and transformed. Both photographers have strong roots with Virginia and the American South, and they were also happy to allow a sense of mystery to enter their work. Although Mann later fully embraced the imperfections of the collodion wet plate process, they were both happy to allow strong vignetting in their images. By using lenses on their 8x10 that were better suited to a 4x5 camera, they produced images that were surrounded by shadow. These flaws not only focus the viewer's attention on the subject, but also adds a sense of history, as if we are viewing the subject across time. Like Gowin, Mann eventually backed away from her family scenes and began taking her camera out into the landscape that surrounded her. When Gowin's family dynamics changed, he felt it was time to make a shift in his photographic focus.
That family had a different sense at that time. And then the grandmother died, then two uncles died. Then the children who were the babies in the pictures are having their own babies now. There's that sense of change. And our job is simply to take things the way they are. We're at the mercy of what nature presents us with as photographers. Our feelings also change. If we find ourselves in a situation we really love and cherish and it nourishes us, it would be a mistake to hope that you would find that situation the rest of your life in that form, in that way. Again, everything belongs to its season, to its place.
In 1980, he received a commission from Seattle Arts to produce photographs in Washington state. It just happened that Mount St. Helens erupted while he and his family were making their way towards Seattle. He decided that he wanted to photograph the incredible destruction caused by the eruption, but he was having real difficulty getting access.
I had been in Vancouver with the Forest Service begging all day long for permission to make a flight over Mount St. Helens. I was ready to start making aerials. I was told no, and really disappointed. And I went to the airport, asked the desk lady, is anybody going up to Mount St. Helens from here? And she said, oh yeah, he's just came in. A pilot came in, and I said, I'm an artist. I'm with the city of Seattle doing this project, and I want to see Mount St. Helens. The pilot looked at me, he says, with kind of a smile, he said, "Can I call you a researcher?" And I about said, "You can call me Mud, you can call me anything." And he picked up the phone, called Vancouver. He said, "I have a researcher here. We're leaving right now for the mountain. We'll be up there for 2.5 hours."
His pictures are compelling not because they portray the eruption in a dramatic, journalistic manner, but because they transform the landscape into something that is ambiguous, lyrical, and conceptually rich. Because he was photographing from a distance, the landscape took on a more meditative form in its abstraction. This experience of making aerial photographs set Gowin on a new course that lasted 20 years. He recorded the inhabited and often scarred face of the American West. As with his family work, he allowed his photography to be guided by what interested him most, and one theme seemed to lead to the next. At one point he said that he never really considered that his photography fitted neatly into a project format.
And what fascinates me the most is what man does in his friendship with nature in order to cooperate and to make it more productive. You know, man can't afford to conceive of nature and exclude himself.
The nuclear sites of Nevada had occupied his consciousness long before he got permission to photograph them. For him, these facilities represented metaphors for light and shadow. He felt the pull to produce pictures that capture both the beauty and the violence, understanding that one can't exist without the other. The images are visually striking and sometimes even serene. This creates discomfort in the viewer. One is drawn in aesthetically, but at the same time, there's the awareness that one's witnessing the traces of catastrophe. It's this tension between the attraction and unease that gives these photographs their power. Aerial and drone pictures are now commonplace, but at the time when Gowin began doing this work, aerial photography was used mainly for technical purposes. As he looked down on the earth through his camera, he was discovering abstracted shapes and forms. He also became aware that from the elevated viewpoint, one is able to trace the footprint of human interaction with the land, and how over time, the same patch of land may possibly be utilized in many different ways.
So many purposes have been laid over this one field, and then the field has been cultivated and it's been made usable. And in so doing, it's been made less wild. People were laying down evidence unintentionally, and that they wouldn't have probably have thought anything about beauty or complexity, but I was experiencing it as exquisite. A really poignant thing of flying in and around and near the paper mills is seeing that you can trace the outline of a rice field. That's a 17th, 18th century rice field. It's still cut into the marshland. How many millions of gallons of water are used every year or every day? And so the water, even when it's returned to the river, so acidic that downriver, you can trace the side of the river that's getting the acid because things are dead along that side of the river. That is really the ultimate reason to do any work, is to educate both your mind and your feelings to what is yet not understood, less than fully comprehended, to experience life as the edge of discovery.
Gowin isn't an environmental activist. but his images reveal his intense moral and intellectual engagement with his subject matter. In his nuclear site imagery and later his images showing the impact of agricultural development, he's expressing the conflict that exists in our relationship with nature. His work isn't a call to action. Rather, it invites reflection and suggests a more intimate relationship with the earth.
For me, these things were both horrific and beautiful at the same time. So a lot of the criticism centered at that time about how dare you make something beautiful which is so awful.
I think this is a good example in which one can recognize the difference between the work produced by an activist photographer and that made by someone who feels strongly about something and has chosen photography to explore their responses. The activist position places the cause or ideology uppermost. It can be a very subtle difference and is often only felt rather than seen. If the cause or doctrine overrules everything else, including the craft, the pictures become overbearing and preachy. For me, that's an immediate turn-off. One doesn't look at art in order to receive a lesson. Rather, one wants to be moved by the artist's ability to express with depth. At the moment, the art world seems to have largely lost touch with this distinction. I hope you enjoyed seeing his work. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
The first time that I showed my father my pictures was I had waited a long time. I had been a photographer for 15 years, and I had hesitated showing my pictures to my father. And I knew that some of the things I was thinking and looking at, he would find offensive. And yet when he finally saw them, and he said, "I've been thinking about it. When you take the testaments, the old and the new, it covers everything." And as the child of a religious person, I knew what that meant. He was saying, there, in the telling of the story of life, there is nothing that can be left out. And that includes the worst that we do, the best that we do, the whole story.